My name is Gavin Evans, and this is my review of The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel Season 3, and this will be a spoiler-filled review, so if you haven't seen it, go and watch it, then come back and watch this review because I will be going in depth. Now, this is a show that for the most part I really enjoy, and I haven't heard the best things about Season 3, so I went into it a bit cautiously. And I have to say, after finishing it up, it is definitely the worst season so far, and I think it's time for this show to wrap up. But let's begin talking about the cast, first with Rachel Brosnahan, and I think she once again is very good here. She's charming, she's likable, she does everything she can with the material that's given to her. That said, she's a narcissist though, and I'll touch on it a bit more in a bit, but I do think they need to lean into that. And the one aspect of her performance that didn't work for me though is in the very last scene when she's crying on the tarmac. And I thought her crying was really bad. But aside from that, she does a really good job. Then you've got Alex Borstein, who's once again really good. Nothing you haven't seen from this character already, but she does a good job with it. Then you've got Michael Zegan, who continues to be likable and charming as Joel. You got Tony Shalhoub, who is really funny with the material he's given to work with. You've got Maren Henkel, who I found to be very annoying and unlikable this season. I couldn't stand her. That scene when she's at the show and she couldn't care less about Miriam and she's dancing like a drunken idiot to Shy Baldwin, I was just like, wow, I really hate this character. She just came across like a complete buffoon and it made me really hate her. Then you've got Jane Lynch, who I haven't talked about in my other season reviews because she's not in the show a bunch. And actually when I heard it was Jane Lynch, I'm like, oh, that voice did sound familiar. I think she's fine here. I like her better in the other two seasons because I think she's better in small doses. I don't really care for her character, but the acting is fine. Then you've got Luke Colby, who is once again very charming and likable, but I don't like what they're doing with him. I prefer him and Midge to be really good friends, and it seems like they're going to start pushing some sort of a relationship with them, and I'm not a fan of that. And the fact that he just happens to be in Florida, I don't buy that for a second. Then you've got Sterling K. Brown, who I thought was really good. I actually wanted more of him because he wasn't in it all too much. Then you've got Leroy McCain, who plays Shy Baldwin, and for most of this season, I found him to be very good. He's got charm, but there's a point where he comes out as gay, and the way that he acts after that fact, I found was way too over the top. Like, he goes from a nice, cool guy to in the last episode being like, oh my goodness, your dress is just fabulous. And I just hate that kind of talking, and it drove me nuts, and it's just a huge 180 for who he was in the season up until that point to who he is now, and it didn't work for me. Then you've also got Stephanie Husu, who was the daughter in Everything Everywhere All at Once, but here she's the new relationship person for Joel, and I think she does a good job with the material she's given to work with. That said, I didn't really care for the character at all, and I don't know who plays him, but there is someone named Gavin in this season, and whenever I hear my name, Gavin, in a TV show or movie, I'm just like, that's my name. It's just not a very common name, so that was nice to hear. And the last performance I do want to talk about might be the best performance of this entire season. He's not in it a ton, but in one scene, he just absolutely excels, and that's Zachary Levi. I wish he was in this season more. I said in my review for the second season that I didn't like the ending. Like, if she chose Benjamin, great. If she chose Joel, great. If she chose herself, great. But the show seemed so undecided, and I thought it was very messily executed. And the fact that they don't really follow up on Benjamin at all, I thought was a huge disservice. So the fact that we do get a scene between them in the very last episode, and just the writing here was great, his performance was great, her performance was great, and it adds a bit of weight to her decision at the end of season 2 that has been lacking up until this point. Like when she's just like, you wouldn't be okay with me making jokes about you, and he's like, you didn't even ask. It just shows that she doesn't know him as well as she thought she did. And then when she's like, oh, well, I'll be gone all the time, and then he's just like, and then the reunions would have been remarkable. Oh, that line. That line is so good. And then he's just like, you didn't even see the ring. It was spectacular. She's like, I bet it was. You can just see that this is a guy who truly loved her, who truly poured his heart and soul out for her, and just got none of that back. And I think Zachary Levi showcases that so incredibly perfectly. And I would have liked so much more of this season to focus on this, to focus on her narcissism and how she really did treat Benjamin like shit. But in this one scene, it is the best scene of the entire season, and I think he does such a great job. And then this show is once again, well, as it always has been, directed by Amy Sherman-Palladino, and I do think she's a very talented director. I think it's very well directed. Some scenes do feel overly orchestrated, but the charm still shines through. There are some funny moments, like there's this one scene where Abe thinks he tastes coconut, and Rose is like, no you don't, and then he's just like, yeah, you're right, there's no coconut. There's this one episode where it begins with Midge and Susie doing all these recordings, and I thought that was really funny. It's very charming, it's very light, it's a breezy watch, and I love the old-fashioned feel. I've said it a billion times and I'll keep on saying it. The outfits in this show are fantastic, it's very well designed, and I love how she's able to perfectly capture the vibe of every room. When Miriam is doing her stand-up and everybody isn't into it, you feel it. When everybody is into it, you feel it. And I think she does a great job of just capturing that. I also love how whenever Miriam messes up, you can see that it gets under her skin just a bit. I love the charming aspect of Miriam with Shy's team. That was really great. And I've always said I like the soundtrack, and I still do. I just want to say that I thought it was absolutely awesome. They used Sink to the Bottom by Fountains of Rain at the end of episode 7. I just didn't expect that song, and I thought it was really great. They also have that song Dream a Little Dream in this season, and is that the song from Stranger Things season 4 that saves Victor's life? I think it is. So I was just like, oh, I just watched Stranger Things season 4, and now that song's here. It's just, never heard this song before, and now I'm hearing it twice. But I think my biggest problem with this season is that it's quite clear that this should have been the last season. In season 1, it's about Miriam working her way up. In season 2, it's about how with success comes sacrifice. And season 3 is about nothing in particular. Like at this point, it just kind of feels like we're going through the motions. I think it should have focused way more on Miriam's choice at the end of season 2 to be all alone and her life moving forward, and how she'll see her kids less, she won't find love, and all she has is her act, which will have its ups and downs. And if she could talk to Shy and see how he deals with that, and the ups and downs of his life, and how unfulfilled he is with his life, I thought that'd be great, and how she has to learn to be accepting of what she has chosen for herself. I think that would have been a great direction for this season and a great layout for a series finale. But I just feel like there's nowhere left to go. And instead what we got, I found to be a giant backtrack. By the end of this season, we're back where we were at the start of season 2. And it just feels like the characters haven't grown much. There hasn't been any real progress or growth, and it's just ran its course. And I feel like it's just going on for the sake of it by this point. And you've got a bunch of these storylines that I just didn't really care for at all. Joel's storyline of starting a club had potential to see how he's moving on from Miriam and creating a life for himself. But then they just keep bringing these two characters back together, and they get them to be remarried at a certain point. And it's just like, you already closed the door on them. Commit to it. Just move on. And then the season finale of season 3 plays, and it's a scene with Joel and Miriam, and they're super happy and in love, and then it turns out it's a flashback, and we see that they are arguing now, and I'm just like, isn't that the exact same note the other 2 season finales ended with? So that doesn't really work for me, and like I said, the fact that she chose to be with Joel at the end of season 2 for only one night, I don't find that to be satisfying. So it would have just been better if she chose no one at the end of season 2 and we just see Joel moving on from her here. That would have been much better. Then you've got this storyline with Archie and Imogen, two characters that have been so incredibly minor, but now they have their own subplot, which I don't really care for because I don't care for these characters. They're strictly background characters for me. But Archie wants to hit on other women, and she ends up becoming a secretary, and I'm like, what was the point of this? You know, it just feels like a subplot for the sake of it, and it has zero impact, as I don't care about these characters. All it does is that it's trying to say that guys will let you down, so give up on them and get a job so you'll never be let down. And I don't agree with that. And for a show that does have hour-long episodes, I feel like they could have cut this stuff out entirely. It would have been all the better for it. Then you've got Susie's storyline, which could have been really great as she starts getting more successful and she has to share time between Midge and Sophie. And it could have been great that if Sophie gets more successful, it creates a wedge between the two friends and they start to break apart and tension can come between them. And it could have shown the side of show business that destroys lifelong bonds. But nope, we're back where we started at the end, and everything with this plot just seemed so pointless. And they introduced the fact that Susie gambles a bunch of Midge's money on this match, and it's just like, where did this come from? Like, there's a scene with Susie and Midge at the casino earlier, but I never got a hint that Susie was gambling with Midge's money. It just comes out of left field, and it just feels incredibly jarring. And then we've also got Abe's and Walter's storyline, which I also hated. It's just the same joke over and over again, and we see them so much more this season. And look, I love Tony Shalhoub as Abe, but I prefer him in small doses. They work better that way, and I just had zero investment in this plot. But it's also time to discuss some politics of this show. Yes, my favorite thing to talk about. So, the very first episode I don't like because they've got this element where Abe is upset that people get arrested for what they say on stage, and he becomes like a social justice warrior or whatever, and he wants to stand up against the patriarchy. And it's just like, why are you drawing attention to this? It has always been a part of this show. It has always had something to say on the freedom of speech back in this period. But now you're drawing attention to it, and now you're taking me out of it. So I didn't call for that. In the second last episode, they talk about this one person who I'm not familiar with. I don't know if this person is truly an awful person or not. But they do have a comment where they say that all right-wing people are racist and sexist. And it's just like, why do you have to say things like that? Like, this show is clearly progressive. It's been from the start, and that's okay. But the second you start saying things like that, you're turning away 50% of your audience. Like, no, most right-wing people are not racist and sexist. So you just divide your audience with a disingenuous claim, and it really ticks me off when shows do that. On top of that, this show has been feminist from the start. It's very clear. This has been a very progressive show since the very first episode. I still really enjoy the first 2 seasons. But now you're starting to see the issues I have with feminism shining its ugly head through everything. Because this show refuses to look down on Midge. And they need to. Midge is a self-absorbed narcissist. But the show wants to keep viewing what she's doing as empowering. And she's an absolute terrible mom, which I bring up every single season because it is important to bring up that she's choosing her own career over her kids, and it's incredibly selfish. She was an awful fiancée to Benjamin and just treated him like dirt. And she's a terrible friend. Like, look what she did do to Shy Baldwin in the last episode, and she just feels sorry for herself. Like, he's completely right to be furious at her. But they treat her like she's a victim. And like, does the show want me to root for her to fuck over all these guys for her own selfish desires? Oh yes, Midge, treat Benjamin like shit because you want to be successful. You do you, girl. You go for it. Oh yes, Miriam, lead Joe on again and again and again. Do whatever you want to do as long as you're a successful woman. And the show just doesn't look down on her. That speech she gives to her mom about how she needs to feel empowered only for her mom to one-up her and give her one right back was just embarrassing. Like, the undertones were always here on this show, but now you're screaming at it in our faces, and we don't need that. The first 2 seasons are progressive and feminist enough. And I just don't like the way that they've handled this character. You look at a show like BoJack Horseman. Love it, it's brilliant, it's perfect. And one thing I love about that show is that it looks down on BoJack more and more as the season progresses, until as the show progresses to the point of the last episode where it's screaming at you to stop making excuses for him. And I wish they would approach this show and this character in a similar way. That it's not okay for her to be treating her family and everyone that cares about her like crap for her own selfish desires. But the showrunners behind this show don't seem to have that viewpoint, so the show doesn't have that viewpoint, and that's where there's a total disconnect. On top of that, I just don't find the story to be good this season. I feel like it's ran its course. And, the performances are all really good, but it's just more of the same at this point. The one performance that really stood out to me was Zachary Levi, because that was the one moment where the show gave more perspective and more depth to a situation, but then they just backtrack that on the very next scene, and it's disappointing. So I hope the next season is better, but I've got a feeling that it's just going to be a slow decline from this point forward. But anyways, I'm going to go ahead and give The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel Season 3 a 4 out of 10. Okay, have you seen The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel Season 3? What did you think about it? Let me know in the comments down below. Make sure you like, make sure you comment, make sure you subscribe. Stay tuned for some more videos soon, and Gavin out.